right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some pretty interesting stuff happening with Palantir and their CEO, Alex Karp.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Seems like kind of a pivotal moment for the
That's
company.
for sure.
We've got some financial analyses and news articles from around February 20th, 2025.
Okay.
Sources like Forbes, Bloomberg, Barron's, and they're all kind of pointing to, yeah, like I said, a pretty pivotal moment.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. We've got Palantir's valuation is going through the roof,
It's crazy, right?
exceeding $271 billion. Puts Alex Karp in a whole different league, like wealth-wise,
Oh, yeah.
comparable to some of the biggest tech giants out there.
Yeah, it's wild. And then at the same time, you have all this talk about potential shifts in defense spending.
Uh-huh.
That could really disrupt the whole industry.
Yeah, it's like a high-stakes chess match, you know?
Totally. So let's start with the king on the board, right? Alex Karp himself. Just how much are we talking about here? How much wealth does this guy have?
Well, it depends who you ask, right?
Right.
Forbes is estimating his net worth to be around $7.7 billion,
Okay.
but Bloomberg, they're going as high as $10.2 billion.
Wow. So somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I mean, either way, you're talking about a level of wealth that puts him up there with the Larry Pages and the Sergey Brins of the world.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all pretty much tied to Palantir stock, right?
Yeah, pretty much. His fortune, it really is a reflection of the company's success.
Right.
And as we said, they are experiencing, pretty remarkable growth. But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So you got Palantir seemingly unstoppable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's all this talk about major defense budget cuts.
Yeah, those headlines were pretty alarming when they first came out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, initially there were rumors of like a $300 billion slash,
Oh, wow.
which, that sent shockwaves through the entire defense sector.
Yeah. So did those rumors pan out? What was the actual number?
Well, according to Barron's, it looks like the proposed cut is actually closer to $50 billion,
Okay.
which is still, that's a significant amount.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 8% of the fiscal year 2026 budget.
Okay.
It seems like what's happening is that President Trump is trying to free up funds for some of his other priorities.
I see.
Like things like border security and drone technology. So it's not a total cut to defense,
Okay.
but definitely a strategic reshuffling.
Yeah, 50 billion is, that's still a lot of money to be moving around. So how are experts reacting to this news?
It's interesting. It's kind of a mixed bag. You have some analysts, like Rob Stallard from Vertical Research Partners.
Okay.
He's calling it a nothing burger.
A nothing burger.
For the defense industry.
Okay.
He doesn't think it's going to significantly impact the major players.
Okay.
But then you have folks like Kreeneen Liwag from Morgan Stanley,
Okay.
who are expressing some serious concerns.
All right. So they're not quite buying the whole nothing burger thing.
Not really, no. They're worried about the potential impact on procurement and R&T for defense contractors.
So on one hand, we've got Palantir doing incredibly well,
Uh-huh.
their valuation going up. On the other hand, there's this potential shakeup in defense spending.
Right.
And we've got experts who are kind of split on what it all means. So what does this mean for Palantir specifically? They've been making huge strides with government contracts,
Yeah.
especially in defense.
Absolutely.
So surely this shift has to have some impact on them, right?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
And initially it did. When the news first came out, Palantir's stock took a dip, along with a bunch of other defense-related companies.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But here's where it gets kind of weird.
Okay.
You've got these traditional defense giants maybe starting to sweat a little bit, but then you have analysts at Wedbush seeing this as a potential advantage for Palantir.
Wait, advantage? How does that work?
Yeah.
You would think that cuts to defense spending would be bad news for a company like Palantir.
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But their reasoning is that by cutting traditional defense spending,
Okay.
it might actually free up more IT budget dollars,
Okay.
specifically for AI-enabled solutions.
I see, I see.
And that plays right into Palantir's strengths, right? They're seen as leaders in that space.
So instead of fighting for a shrinking piece of the pie, they might actually end up getting a bigger slice of a different pie altogether.
Exactly. And one of the key voices driving this bullish outlook is Wedbush analyst Dan Ives.
Okay.
He's made a pretty bold prediction
Okay, let's hear it.
that Palantir could hit $1 trillion market cap,
$1 trillion.
becoming the next Oracle or Salesforce of the AI revolution.
Wow. So if Ives is right, and
Yeah.
Palantir's in a good position to actually benefit from these defense spending changes,
Right.
why would Alex Karp decide to sell off some of his stock right now?
Well, that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because right in the middle of all this, Karp announces plans to sell some of his Palantir stock.
Okay.
And not just a small amount either. Initially, he filed to sell 48.9 billion shares.
Okay.
estimated to be worth around $6 billion.
$6 billion.
Huh.
Wow. That's a huge chunk of his holding. That definitely sends a signal, even if it's not necessarily one of like, oh, I don't believe in the company anymore.
Right. It's definitely gotten people talking, especially given everything else that's going on.
For sure.
But, there are a few things to keep in mind here. So first, he later revised that plan,
Okay.
reduced the sale to 9.98 million shares.
Okay.
Still a lot, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Worth about $1.23 billion.
Okay.
But it's less than that initial filing.
Right, right.
And it's also important to note that these sales are being done through a Rule 10b5-1 trading plan.
Now, what does that mean? I'm not super familiar with all the Wall Street jargon.
Yeah, so basically it's a mechanism that allows insiders like CEOs to pre-schedule their stock sales.
Okay.
And it follows very specific rules
Okay.
to make sure that they're not, doing anything shady, basically.
Oh, gotcha.
It's designed to prevent any appearance of insider trading.
Gotcha.
Make sure they're not making moves based on information that the public doesn't have.
So Karp selling his stock, even with all this positive news about Palantir, isn't necessarily a sign that he's like, jumping ship.
It could be for any number of reasons, right? Like personal financial planning. Maybe he wants to diversify his assets.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to do some philanthropy. We don't really know.
Right.
But what we do know is that this news, combined with the uncertainty around the defense budget, did contribute to a recent decline in Palantir's stock price.
So it's we have a bit of a puzzle here, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got analysts like Ives painting this incredibly optimistic picture of Palantir dominating the AI landscape
Right.
and actually benefiting from these proposed spending changes. On the other hand, you have the CEO, Alex Karp, selling a good chunk of his stock.
Right.
And the market kind of reacting with a bit of hesitancy.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected everything is, right?
Yeah.
You have individual actions, market sentiment, the broader political and technological landscape. It all plays a role.
Well, it sounds like we need to dig a little deeper into this whole AI revolution. Everyone keeps talking about it,
Yeah.
especially in the context of national security. Palantir seems to be at the center of it all. So I'm really curious to understand why they're considered such a key player.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a really interesting development called the Stargate project.
Okay, Stargate project.
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of it, but honestly, I don't really know the details.
So it's this really ambitious,
Okay.
some might even say audacious initiative,
Uh-huh.
backed by some major players like Microsoft and SoftBank.
Okay.
The goal is to build out this massive AI infrastructure.
Okay.
And we're talking potential investment reaching like $500 billion.
Wow, $500 billion. That's a lot of money.
It is.
So what's that overall aim? Like, what are they trying to achieve with that?
Think of it as like they're creating this foundation, right?
Okay.
That can handle all sorts of AI applications,
Uh-huh.
including some that are, super crucial for national security.
So it's like the AI version of the Manhattan Project.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some parallels there.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is that Wedbush sees Palantir as being like a key player in this.
Okay.
They already have the software platforms,
Okay.
the expertise in data analysis,
Right.
the deep connections within these government agencies.
So they're kind of already there, right?
They're pretty well positioned, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Big picture, what's driving this huge push toward AI and national security in the first place? Like, why is Palantir considered to be so important in all of this?
Well, think about just the sheer volume of data that intelligence agencies and defense departments are dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Satellite imagery, signals intelligence,
Social media, all that.
all of it. Yeah, it's like a fire hose of information.
Right.
And the traditional methods of analysis just can't keep up.
Right.
AI has the potential to sift through all of that.
Yeah.
Identify patterns, flag potential threats, like in ways that humans just can't.
So it's almost like having like a superpowered analyst
Yeah,
working 24/7.
that's a great way to put it.
Just, yeah, no breaks, no sleep, just crunching data all the time.
Exactly. And that's where Palantir really shines.
Okay.
They've been building software platforms designed for this kind of analysis for years.
Uh-huh.
They're not just offering algorithms.
Right.
They're providing a whole ecosystem for managing and understanding these, massively complex data sets.
So it's not really about replacing human analysts with robots.
It's
more about giving them better tools to make decisions.
Exactly. Augmenting human capabilities.
Yeah.
Allowing analysts to make better and faster decisions.
Right.
Especially in situations where, speed and accuracy are absolutely crucial.
But I imagine there are also some concerns about the downsides,
Oh,
right? I
absolutely.
mean, as AI gets more powerful
Yeah.
and starts playing a larger role in these really sensitive areas, we have to start thinking about bias, transparency, accountability.
Those are all critical questions.
Yeah,
We've already seen examples of AI systems, exhibiting bias in other fields.
right.
So it's absolutely essential that we address these concerns right from the start, especially when we're talking about national security.
Yeah, it's high stakes stuff.
Very high
So
stakes.
it's this balancing act, right? Harnessing this incredible power of AI, but also trying to mitigate the potential risks at the same time.
It really is. And while there's, a lot of excitement,
Yeah,
there's also, I think, a healthy dose of caution. It's not a silver bullet.
right.
It's a tool, and it needs to be used responsibly.
So going back to Alex Karp's decision to sell some of that stock,
Yeah.
it seems even more strange now.
Right?
If Palantir is really at the forefront of this AI revolution
Mm.
and maybe involved in these massive projects like Stargate, wouldn't he want to hang on to all of his stock?
Logically, yes. But
Mm.
Alex Karp, he's not your average CEO. He's a philosopher, a scholar, someone who seems to be motivated by, something more than just money.
Yeah, he's a bit of an enigma, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He can talk about, complicated philosophy as easily as he can talk about algorithms.
Right. So it makes his actions that much harder to interpret.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's got some long-term vision that we just don't know about. Maybe he's
Mhm.
just diversifying, or
Yeah.
maybe it's something else entirely.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's like even with all the data and all the analysis in the world, there's still that human element of unpredictability.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this stuff so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about numbers and trends.
Right.
It's about people, their motivations,
Yeah.
and this complex interplay between technology, politics, and human behavior.
Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Alex Karp's wealth, his stock sale, Palantir's potential role in this, whole changing AI landscape, especially in the context of national security.
Absolutely.
So, as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways? What do we want our listeners to remember? Yeah, it does feel like we're at kind of a crossroads here.
Yeah.
So many possibilities, but also, we have to ask some serious questions.
Yeah, and what we're seeing with Palantir, it's almost like a microcosm of this bigger shift that's happening in the world.
Right,
AI, it's not some futuristic concept anymore.
right.
It's being woven into the fabric of society,
Yeah.
especially when you look at defense and intelligence.
And it seems like Palantir, with their expertise and their, deep connections to the government, they're at the front of that wave.
Yeah, for sure. But like we've been talking about, there are a lot of unknowns, a lot of mixed signals.
Right? Analysts are saying they're going to dominate. Alex Karp's selling off some of his stock. And then we have this whole, debate going on in society about the role of AI. It's messy.
It is, yeah. And then that's what makes it such a fascinating story, right? It's
Yeah.
not just a straight line.
Right.
It's twists and turns, and it makes you think critically about this technology.
Totally. So where do we go from here? I mean, we've talked about the good things, faster analysis, better decisions, but
Wow.
what about the downsides? What should our listeners be thinking about as they kind of, digest all of this?
Well, I think one of the most important things to consider is the potential for unintended consequences.
Okay, so like what do you mean by that?
Well, we're talking about extremely powerful systems that can analyze mountains of data,
Right.
but those systems are only as good as the data they're trained on,
Yeah, makes sense.
and the humans who are designing and using them.
Right. So we can't just blindly trust these systems, especially when it comes to national security.
Exactly. And then you have the whole issue of transparency and accountability.
Okay.
Like, if an AI system makes a mistake, whose fault is it?
Yeah.
The programmer, the agency using it, the company that created it.
Right. Who's holding the bag?
Exactly. These are tough questions, and we're going to have to grapple with them as AI gets more ingrained in our lives.
It sounds like we're really just at the start of this whole conversation.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a lot to figure out about, how we use this tech responsibly.
For sure.
So for our listeners who are, really interested in this, what would you recommend? Where should they go from here?
Stay curious. Read articles, listen to podcasts, talk to people about AI and what it all means.
Right.
There's some great organizations out there doing really important work on AI ethics and policy and governance.
Okay.
I'd recommend checking those out, learning as much as you can.
That's great advice. And as always, we encourage our listeners to think for themselves, ask those tough questions, and come to their own conclusions. Because in a world where there's just so much information, it's the ability to figure things out, to connect the dots that really matters.
Absolutely. It's been a really interesting deep dive.
Yeah, it has. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.